Channel Bank Jali would give you several information. The first information about progressives retract Ukraine letter to Biden after backlash. By CBS.com, updated on October 25, 2022, 5:57 p.m. App. A group of progressive Democrats in Congress said Tuesday it had retracted a letter to the White House urging President Joe Biden to engage in direct diplomatic talks with Russia after it triggered an uproar among Democrats and raised questions about the strength of the party's support for Ukraine. In a statement, Representative Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Progressive Caucus, said the caucus was withdrawing the letter it had sent less than 24 hours earlier. It was signed by 30 members of the party's liberal flank. The letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff without vetting, the Washington Democrat wrote in a statement. As chair of the caucus, Jayapal said she took responsibility for this. The unusual retraction capped a tense 24-hour period for Democrats. Many reacted angrily to the appearance of flagging support for the president's Ukraine strategy, coming just weeks before a midterm election where their majorities in Congress are at risk. The back and forth spotlighted the fragile nature of Biden's relationship with the progressive wing of his party, raising stark questions about their ability to work together not only on Ukraine funding, which seems secure for now, but on more pressing issues that are top priorities for liberals. The letter had called for Biden to pair the unprecedented economic and military support for Ukraine with a proactive diplomatic push, redoubling efforts to seek a realistic framework for a ceasefire. The alternative to diplomacy is protracted war, with both its attendant certainties and catastrophic and unknowable risks, the letter read. Jayapal said the letter was unfairly conflated with recent comments from Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, RKLF, who warned that Republicans will not write a blank check for Ukraine if they win back the House majority in November. The proximity of these statements created the unfortunate appearance that Democrats, who have strongly and unanimously supported and voted for every package of military, strategic, and economic assistance to the Ukrainian people, are somehow aligned with Republicans who seek to pull the plug on American support for Ukraine, Jayapal said. Yet Jayapal did not disavow the substance of the letter or the push for Biden to engage in diplomacy. Members of the caucus have been calling for a diplomatic solution since Russian President Vladimir Putin's forces invaded Ukraine on February 24. The text of the letter had been circulating since at least June, but only a handful of lawmakers signed on at the time, according to two Democrats familiar with the matter who were granted anonymity to discuss internal party deliberations. Some Democrats who signed the letter months ago said they no longer support it. I signed this letter on June 30, but a lot has changed since then, Democratic Representative Sarah Jacobs of New York said on Twitter. I wouldn't sign it today. We have to continue supporting Ukraine economically and militarily to give them the leverage they need to end this war, she said. Despite the retraction and messy behind-the-scenes process, some Democratic lawmakers said they still backed the sentiments behind the letter, arguing that it is the prerogative of Congress to debate the issue as it continues to approve billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine. I have voted for arms to Ukraine and will continue to support providing arms to Ukraine to stand up against Putin's brutal aggression, Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, said in an interview Tuesday. At the same time, it's my obligation to make sure we are mitigating the risk of nuclear war, that we are making sure that the conflict doesn't escalate and that we are working toward a negotiated settlement that will be a just peace. That is the framework of the letter. John Kirby, the spokesman for the National Security Council, said Monday that the White House had received the letter and appreciates the progressives' very thoughtful concerns about the conflict in Ukraine. They express support in that letter for the president's approach and we welcome that as well, Kirby said. The backlash against the progressives who signed the letter, including some of the most outspoken voices of the caucus like Reps. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar came most pointedly at Jayapal, who is the face of the liberal faction. It was the latest setback for the Congresswoman, who has worked for the better half of the past year to help Biden and the Democrats deliver on some of the party's core legislative promises, often at a cost to some of her caucus's more liberal priorities. Most notably, last fall, Jayapal helped lead the bipartisan infrastructure package over the finish line after party divisions threatened its passage in the House. The recent mishap also casts doubt on her whispered ambitions to join Democratic leadership. Since the war began, Congress has approved tens of billions in emergency security and humanitarian assistance for Ukraine, while the Biden administration has shipped billions worth of weapons and equipment from military inventories. Russia has notified the U.S. its annual nuclear exercise has begun, U.S. officials say. Last month, lawmakers approved about $12.3 billion in Ukraine-related aid as part of a bill that finances the federal government through December 16. The money included aid for the Ukrainian military as well as money to help the country's government provide basic services to its citizens. That comes on top of more than $50 billion provided in two previous bills. Financial support for Ukraine garnered strong bipartisan support in the Senate and the House after Russia's invasion, but conservative opposition was present from the start. Republicans accounted for the only votes against a $40 billion aid package in the spring. Recent comments from McCarthy have more clearly reflected the GOP's growing skepticism about the cost of financial support for Kyiv. In private, GOP lawmakers who support aid to Ukraine say there could be an opportunity to pass one more tranche of assistance in an end-of-year spending package before Republicans potentially take control in the next Congress. Skond News Kyiv, U.S. and other allies reject Russian defense chief's claim of dirty bomb provocation from Ukraine. Updated on October 24, 2022, 4:03 a.m. CBS, Ukraine and several of its allies, including the United States, have rejected a claim from Russia's defense minister, who said that Ukraine was preparing to detonate a dirty bomb in its own territory. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu made the claims in a series of calls with US, British, French and Turkish defense officials. We reject reports of Minister Shoigu's transparently false allegations that Ukraine is preparing to use a dirty bomb on its own territory. The world would see through any attempt to use this allegation as a pretext for escalation, said U.S. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson. A dirty bomb uses conventional explosives to spew radiological materials into the air and contaminate the surrounding area. The size of the area contaminated would depend on the size of the explosion. Russian authorities repeatedly have made allegations that Ukraine could detonate a dirty bomb in a false flag attack and blame it on Moscow. Ukrainian authorities, in turn, have accused the Kremlin of hatching such a plan. British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace strongly rejected Shoigu's claim and warned Moscow against using it as a pretext for escalation. The British Ministry of Defence noted that Shoigu, in a call with Wallace, alleged that Ukraine was planning actions facilitated by Western countries, including the UK, to escalate the conflict in Ukraine. The Defense Secretary refuted these claims and cautioned that such allegations should not be used as a pretext for greater escalation, the ministry said. In a televised address Sunday evening, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky suggested that Moscow itself was setting the stage for deploying a radioactive device on Ukrainian soil. If Russia calls and says that Ukraine is allegedly preparing something, it means only one thing: that Russia has already prepared all of it, Zelensky said. The mention of the dirty bomb threat in Shoigu's calls seem to indicate the threat of such an attack has risen to an unprecedented level. The French Ministry of the Armed Forces said Shoigu told his counterpart, Sébastien Lecornu, that the situation in Ukraine was rapidly worsening and trending towards uncontrollable escalation. It appears that there is a shared feeling that the tensions have approached the level that could raise the real threat for all, said Fyodor Lukyanov, the Kremlin-connected head of the Council for Foreign and Defense Policies, a Moscow-based group of top foreign affairs experts. The rising tensions come as Russian authorities reported building defensive positions in occupied areas of Ukraine and border regions of Russia, reflecting fears that Ukrainian forces may attack along new sections of the 620-mile front line of the war, which enters its ninth month on Monday. In recent weeks, Ukraine has focused its counteroffensive mostly on the Kherson region. Their relentless artillery strikes cut the main crossings across the Dnieper River, which bisects the southern region, leaving Russian troops on the West Bank short of supplies and vulnerable to encirclement. Kirill Stramusov, the deputy head of the Russian-installed regional administration in Kherson, said Sunday in a radio interview that Russian defensive lines have been reinforced and the situation has remained stable, since local officials strongly encouraged all residents of the region's capital and nearby areas Saturday to evacuate by ferry to the river's east bank. The region is one of four that Russian President Vladimir Putin illegally annexed last month and put under Russian martial law on Thursday. Kherson City has been in Russian hands since the early days of the war, but Ukraine's forces have made advances toward reclaiming it. About 20,000 Kherson residents have moved to places on the east bank of the Dnieper River, the Kremlin-backed regional administration reported. The Ukrainian military said Sunday that Russia's military also withdrew its officers from areas on the West Bank, leaving newly mobilized, inexperienced forces. The Ukrainian claim could not be independently verified. As Ukraine presses south after liberating the Kharkiv region in the north last month, authorities in the western Russian provinces bordering northeastern Ukraine appeared jittery. The governor of Russia's Kursk region, Roman Starovoyt, said Sunday that 2 defensive lines have been built and a third one would be finished by November 5. Defensive lines were also established in the Belgorod region, Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov said. More defensive positions were being built in the Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine, said Yevgeny Prigozhin, a millionaire Russian businessman who owns the Wagner Group, a mercenary military company that has played a prominent role in the war. Prigozhin said his company was constructing a Wagner line in the Luhansk region, another of the Ukrainian provinces Putin illegally annexed last month. Prigozhin posted images last week showing a section of newly built defences and trench systems southeast of the town of Kremenna. The British Defence Ministry said Sunday, the project suggests Russia is making a significant effort to prepare defences in depth behind the current front line, likely to deter any rapid Ukrainian counteroffensives. Russia's forces captured Luhansk several months ago. Pro-Moscow separatists declared independent republics in the region and neighboring Donetsk 8 years ago, and Putin made controlling all of both provinces a goal at the war's outset. The Institute for the Study of War, a think tank in Washington, said Sunday that Russia's latest strategy of targeting power plants appeared aimed at diminishing Ukrainians' will to fight and forcing the government in Kyiv to devote more resources to protecting civilians and energy infrastructure. It said the effort was unlikely to damage Ukrainian morale but would have significant economic impacts. President Zelensky said Sunday that utilities workers were well on their way to restoring electricity supplies cut off by large-scale Russian missile strikes Saturday, but acknowledged that it would take longer to provide heating. 9 regions across Ukraine, from Odessa in the southwest to Kharkiv in the northeast, saw more attacks targeting energy and other critical infrastructure over the past day, the Ukrainian Army's General Staff said. It reported a total of 25 Russian airstrikes and more than 100 missile and artillery strikes around Ukraine. In response, Zelensky appealed to mayors and other local leaders to ensure that Ukrainians heed official calls to conserve energy. Now is definitely not the time for bright storefronts and signs, he said. By the way, its last news, Russia unleashes barrage of missiles in Ukraine in massive attack. Updated on October 22, 2022, 2:46 p.m. CBS app. Russia unleashed a barrage of missiles overnight. A massive missile attack that targeted critical infrastructure, Ukraine's Air Force said in a statement Saturday. Ukrainian officials confirmed at least half a dozen regions were targeted, including the capital city, Kyiv. The Air Force said it downed 18 out of 33 cruise missiles launched from air and sea. Several rockets targeting the capital were shot down on Saturday morning, Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said on the Telegram messaging service. Similar reports were made by the governors of 6 western and central provinces, as well as the southern Odessa region on the Black Sea. The attack is part of Russia's latest strategy. Over the past 2 weeks, Moscow has increased its attacks on key civilian infrastructure across Ukraine, as the country braces for a cold winter. About 40% of the country's electric power system has been severely damaged, officials said. President Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier in the week that 30% of Ukraine's power stations have been destroyed since October 10. On Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people in central and western Ukraine woke up to power outages. The western city of Khmelnytskyi, which straddles the Bug River and was home to some 275,000 people before the war, was left with no electricity Saturday, shortly after local media reported several loud explosions. The city council urged local residents to store water, in case it's also gone within an hour, in a social media post on Saturday. The mayor of Lusk, a city of 215,000 in Ukraine's far west, made a similar appeal on Telegram on Saturday. Power in Lusk had been partially knocked out after Russian missiles slammed into local energy facilities, he said. The central city of Uman, a key pilgrimage center for Hasidic Jews which counted some 100,000 residents before the war, was also plunged into darkness after a rocket hit a nearby power station, regional authorities said on Telegram. In the capital and 4 surrounding regions, including Cherkasy, rolling blackouts came into effect on Saturday morning in response to the reduced power supplies. The state energy company Ukrenergo continued to urge all Ukrainians to conserve energy. Earlier this week, Zelensky called on consumers to curb their power use between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. daily, and avoid using energy-guzzling appliances such as electric heaters. Thank you for your attention and don't forget to like and subscribe.